Well, happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome into another Big 12 breakdown. JMO, did you get your suitcases out of the Farrell Center finally?
Yes, finally. Uh, not fun couple of days really there. Baylor versus OU times two. Tough loss for the Baylor women on Tuesday, but a big win for the men last night. So I've spent my share of time in the Farrell Center this week already, and it's only Thursday.
It's only Thursday. I made the
Yeah,
joke on my Instagram story. They're going to start charging me rent at this place
yeah.
as much as I'm here right now. But with signing day and the game yesterday, heck of a day. Couple of signings in Killeen, and then got to make the drive up and cover a Big 12 basketball game. That's never a bad Wednesday night though. Kind of a wild midweek slate, John, and that's where I kind of want to start. So, Monday night. Final in Allen Fieldhouse, Kansas 88, Texas 80. Allen Fieldhouse does what it does. I don't think anything less of Texas from this game. Do you?
No, not at all. That's after Texas won the first meeting and Kansas wanting to hold their home court and win there. It's tough, and it was a tough 2-game stretch. That was a back-to-back for Texas at K-State on Saturday,
Right.
and then that was a big win. And then at Kansas, they just stayed up there, with only one day between those two. So now that was just a good win for Kansas, not a bad loss in any respect, really, for Texas.
I think what is telling about Texas is on back-to-back Big Mondays, they won in different ways. Marcus Carr is kind of the straw that stirs the drink for them. He didn't do a whole lot against Baylor. Baylor did a nice job of keying on Carr in that game down at the Moody Center last week, which my ears are still ringing from. But then he had 29 points at Kansas Monday night. So these Longhorns and Rodney Terry's ball club is finding different ways to get it done. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, especially come next month.
They're very talented. I mean, that Texas team is really good. We've known that all along, and really give a lot of credit to Rodney Terry. Stepping into that situation to be the interim head coach or acting head coach for the remainder of this season, he has really held that group, not just held them together, but they have excelled, with him as the head coach. So I give Rodney, who's a Baylor assistant way back, we've known him for a long, long time. I give him a lot of credit for the success there.
Tuesday night is a game that we don't need to spend a ton of time on. There's a couple of really good teams in the Big 12 that are just struggling on the road at the moment. And this was one of them. Kansas State 82, TCU 61. Damian Ball 16 points, and Jerome Tang is holding serve 13-1 inside the octagon this season.
And no Mike Miles for TCU. That's a big deal right now. Baylor plays at TCU on Saturday. So you take that guy out of that lineup or that guy out of any lineup, and any team's going to have a rough go. So, I'm sure, and I don't know the prognosis. Maybe you do, Curtis, of when he might be back. But it's a different team, TCU is, without Mike Miles.
My understanding is it was a hyperextension of his knee, and given how bad that injury looked when at Mississippi State, hyperextension is great news. As far as anything else from Twitter, I haven't seen anything. And so just as a Big 12 basketball fan, I want to see Mike Miles come back because he's a dynamic player and he's exciting to watch, whether you're cheering for him, against him, or you don't have a dog in the fight. It's an incredible, he's an incredible guard. And so that is a huge loss. And I'm glad you touched on that for TCU. Wednesday night was a busy night. If we're not careful how we talk about this game, we might get called for a foul as well. West Virginia 76, Iowa State 71. Lots of whistles, kind of a, stereotypical West Virginia home game in this one. 49 fouls called. Iowa State called for 30.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, we've had several games almost to that level, or maybe to that level this year, and it just seems like the officiating is very much maybe under the microscope, or people are just watching it, noticing it more this year. Don't you think?
I think so. And it's funny when I watch these games. So for those of you who don't know, if I haven't talked about it for a while, I'm actually a registered high school basketball official in the state. I am registered with the Temple chapter, in the Texas High School Basketball Officials Association, and I did a 5A girls playoff game back in the spring of 2019. And so the way I look at the game and I look at the officiating is a little bit different. And the way that I was taught to look at a foul is if it affects what's called your SBRQ, your speed, balance, rhythm, and quickness. If you're not able to get around the defender because they bump you out of the line, there's a whistle on it. And so there are some of these games that are going to have an exorbitant amount of whistles because of how physical this conference really is. In the Big Ten, everybody's so overly physical that and it's just kind of how they recruit and how they play the game there, that there's not as much because you're trying to avoid nights like this in Morgantown in every game in the conference. And realistically, there is only one team that plays that overly physical style in the conference, and that's West Virginia, at least to me. And then when you put Iowa State up against them as well, Iowa State's style is very much kind of run and shoot combined with pressing defense. And so I think this was just kind of the perfect recipe to get a foul count that high. I'll be honest, in the first 5 minutes of the game last night in the Farrell Center, I thought we were going to be getting into the 40s on the foul count in Baylor, Oklahoma as well, because of how I don't want to say how overly physical, but how precise each defense was. They were both defenses were in a man-to-man, and both defenses were kind of up in your grill trying to get a steal, trying to force you over the screen. And that tends to lend itself to a bit of a higher foul count. So I was shocked it didn't get to that point in Baylor, but this was a very physical game.
Yeah, very much. And we're seeing more and more of those. And one way it plays out also is we very rarely play 2-hour games anymore,
Mm-hmm.
Normally you think that's why basketball is such a great sport for TV, because it normally fits in a 2-hour window. But with more fouls, you've got more free throws, that the clocks are stopped when there's free throws. So it extends the game. And, we Baylor have had, I want to say 2 or 3 games that are 2.5 hours, the game length this year. And that's not an overtime game. So it does extend the game. And listen, those guys are really well trained and they know what they're doing. And I respect the heck out of the officials, but they are being scrutinized a little bit more this year, maybe than in years past.
Yeah, and there were a few rule changes in there as well that kind of lend themselves to this. The flop foul that the flop Class B technical that Jonathan Chamwa Chachua. It's the first time I've had to say his name since we learned the correct pronunciation. But that's a new rule, and that's going to add to these foul counts as well. And so you add the age of social media, and you add that even if it's on ESPN Plus, every single game is on TV now. Yeah. There is more attention on these guys than ever. Look, when I went to an officiating camp, Keith Kimball was one of my clinicians. The guy is awesome at what he does. And that's a Waco native. And then there's a reason John Higgins is doing 7 games in 8 days, because coaches want him because he's good. And so these guys are, like you said, are highly trained. I think there's just some situations that lend themselves to things that get noticed on social media. So excellent point, John. Oklahoma State 71, Texas Tech 68. Oklahoma State needs a and 1 with 0.4 of a second to play to beat last place Texas Tech at home. But this is just kind of one of those, every time Tech and Oklahoma State play, it seems to be a close game. Bryce Thompson, the Kansas transfer, 21 points, 4 steals. If you're Oklahoma State, John, are you just happy you walk out of there with a win, or are you sounding some alarm bells with how you had to get it done?
I think in this league this year, you celebrate a win, no matter how you get it, no matter what the margin is, whether it's 1 point or it's 30, you just celebrate the win and move on to the next game. Because again, we've said this, Tech is not that bad, not as bad as their record might indicate.
Right.
With that loss last night, they're 1-10 in conference play. They are not that bad a team. They are very well coached. And Oklahoma State, your school was on a roll. I mean, Oklahoma State was one of the hottest teams in the league. They still are. I think they've won 4 in a row now. So they should absolutely just celebrate that win, even though it came down to the wire.
Yeah, a great winning streak for Oklahoma State. I know Mike Boynton was starting to feel some pressure, and I think this win streak is starting to take some of that off. I would run through a brick wall for Mike Boynton. I think he's an incredible. He's like a Jerome Tang with a different state school in the conference. He's so likable by the fan base. So I'm happy they got a win. I agree with you. If Tech is the worst team in your conference, you have a pretty good conference at this point.
That's right.
I'm looking at the KenPom ratings right now. And Texas Tech, its adjusted efficiency margin is just 2 points under what Oklahoma's is. And that's pretty close. And so a lot of parity in this conference. Yeah. Tech's going to find a way, man. They're going to steal one in Lubbock. I don't see a world where they don't. But this was and you could argue they did last Monday, coming back from a Big 12 record, 23 points down to beat Iowa State in overtime. And so I agree with you. You take the win and you move on to the next one. And for Oklahoma State, that to keep that win streak going is a good thing. Finally, the game we were at last night, John. Number 14, Baylor 82, Oklahoma 72. I didn't even know that OU took the lead in the second half because it was such a frantic second half that it's like, okay, another bucket, shoot the scoreboard so I know what the score is and what the situation is, and get back to shooting the next highlight. And I'm not even paying attention to what I'm shooting on the scoreboard. Pretty good win for Baylor.
I think a very good win. Oklahoma, again, is one of those teams that is better than their record might indicate. They're 2-9 in the conference after that loss last night. But when Baylor played up there in Norman, that was a 2-point game, 62-60. Baylor was very fortunate to get that win on the road. But Oklahoma plays so hard. They are really tough defensively also, and they've got some weapons. So that was a really good win for the Bears to protect their home court. And I would say add to it, Oklahoma, not that they were desperate, but that was, that would have been a big win for them on the road. And they need those now to try to get themselves back up into NCAA consideration.
Exactly. They are in Joe Lunardi's work to do category in the bracketology stuff at ESPN. Baylor has now won 4 conference home games in a row since losing to Kansas State in overtime on January 7th. So a heck of a streak for the Bears. The one conference loss since January 7th was on the road at Texas in a game that the Bears, let's be honest, had a chance to win down the stretch. I think Oklahoma, like you said, has some work to do to get to the NCAA tournament. And I'm no Alex Kirshner, but let's use that as a segue. We're going to bring back a segment from football season and do it with a little bit of a twist. We're going to give our 3 big keys, but instead of to Baylor's game this weekend in this case, we are both going to give our 3 biggest keys for teams in the Big 12 to either improve their NCAA tournament seeding or make the NCAA tournament, even if it's going to Dayton. We have not picked schools. Do you want to do it where when one of us picks a school, it's off the board and we've got to go with someone else? Or do you want to, if as long as the key is different, we can repeat a school?
Yeah, I think we can repeat a school. This is brand new. Let's write the rules as we go. How about that?
I like it. As we set the scene for this, to give you an idea, the quick run through the Big 12 men's basketball standings at the moment. Sole possession of first place at 8-3 in the league is Texas. And then there is a 4-way tie for second place. It is 7-4 Kansas, Kansas State, Baylor, and Iowa State, and they all have different situations against the other. The Kansas schools split with each other. Kansas split with Iowa State. Baylor lost to Iowa State, beat Kansas, though, and K-State beat Baylor. And I think Iowa State, or did they play that one in Ames? I think Iowa State might actually have the tiebreaker over K-State. Anyway, then in 6th place, off of tiebreakers themselves, yep, you guessed it, the unranked Oklahoma State Cowboys, because they beat TCU in Stillwater on Saturday, which is in 7th place because of the tiebreaker. West Virginia in 8th, Oklahoma is in 9th, and Texas Tech is in 10th. John, I will let you go first, my friend.
All right. I like this new game we're going to play here. Here's the first thing I think of. as far as top three things Big 12 schools need to do to improve their stock. How about that?
Let's do it.
For TCU, it's something that is sort of, I'll say TCU, and I'll say it's out of their control. But man, they need Mike Miles back.
Yeah.
If they can get that guy back, he is just dynamic. And they are really a different team with him in the lineup compared to him not available. Remember the Baylor game when TCU came in here and won over Baylor very early in conference, second game, I think, of conference.
Right.
And Baylor had a 17-point lead in that game, but TCU, you just felt like wasn't out of it. And sure enough, Mike Miles had 33 points that night. I'll never forget that. 33 for Mike Miles. And he is just that kind of difference maker at a very high level. So that'd be my first one is for TCU, somehow get that guy back on the floor.
Get that guy back on the floor. He's electric. I mean, he was the preseason conference player of the year. That is a huge loss for the Horned Frogs. And so I like that. But let's put some pressure on the training staff, not to rush him back, but to get him healthy.
Don't rush him back. Right.
Don't rush him back. But the league is better with Mike Miles in it. I love that key, John. I'm going to go. And as I do this, I'm going to turn my computer a little bit and show you one of my favorite decorations in my house. It is a map of my college town. And we're going to go there because, John, Oklahoma State, I don't believe, and I'm going to do some research as I go, but I do not believe the Cowboys have a conference road win yet. They beat Norman they beat OU in Norman. Other than that, they lost in Waco. They lost in Austin. They lost in Manhattan. They've got to get a quality road win at this point, because if you look at where OU, the trajectory for the Sooners is at the moment, not on the season, but at the moment, that win is not going to be enough to get the Cowboys into the NCAA tournament field or to avoid sending them to Dayton.
Right.
They're, in their conference road games, controversial loss at Kansas to open conference play, lost by 8 with a controversial whistle at Kansas State, lost by 16 at Baylor, lost by 14 at Texas, won by 10 at Oklahoma, and they go back on the road this weekend at Iowa State. I think for Oklahoma State, you got to get a road win if you're going to avoid Dayton.
All right, that's good. I like Oklahoma State. I like the way they're going right now, even though that game last night was close. And Baylor makes the trip there late in February. I think the next to last game of the regular season. So that'll be tough. My second one would be for Iowa State to find a way to get a little more comfortable on the road.
Yep.
You know how good they are at home. They're 5-0 in conference play in Hilton Coliseum, but they're 2-4 in road games in the conference. This is Iowa State, including that loss at West Virginia last night. So Iowa State's a really good team, and for the most part, a veteran team. But for some reason, well, I know what it is. I mean, that's a great home court advantage in Hilton Coliseum. But beyond that, they've got to figure out a way to win some key road games, sitting at 2-4 in the conference in road games.
That's a really good key. I mean, we talked about it earlier. On the road, Iowa State blew a Big 12 record 23-point lead and lost in overtime at Texas Tech. Right now, that is Texas Tech's only conference win. You stole mine. That was going to be my next one.
Oh, sorry.
I don't want to. You're totally fine. I'm not going to repeat an exact key with an exact team. For Baylor, defense.
Yeah, good one.
Baylor. It rates in KenPom as the worst defense in the Big 12 at 72 in the country. It is, after last night, the best offense in the country, but it is the worst defense in the Big 12. You've got to get some stops. Some of the rebounds that Oklahoma got last night were just perplexing to me. And I'm not trying to be rude, but there were some rebounds that I was like, okay, Jalen Bridges has that, or Flo's got that, or John has that, and then somehow they wind up in a crimson jersey going the other way. So lock it down on defense, get get better rebounds. That is Baylor's Achilles heel right now. It is, you've got to be able to get a couple of stops and give your offense a little bit of a cushion, because for as good as this offense is, imagine if it had some cushion to work with, John.
Yeah, and you stole my third one, so we're even now. But that is something that Baylor has been so good at the last few years. I mean, really, their calling card has been lockdown defense, And I've heard several theories. Tell me what you think about this. One theory is that, and this is not from our coaches, this is from outside, that the Baylor relies on the guards so much for scoring that they play a lot of minutes and they don't have the energy to expend on the defensive end like they have in years past. Does that make sense at all?
It does. And I think you're spot on with it. I talked to a friend in college basketball a few weeks ago, and I asked him point blank, is this the worst Baylor defense in the Scott Drew era? And he said, yeah, but I don't know how bad of a thing that is with where the game is right now. And of course, we did put a date on it because some of those early Scott Drew years were a little rough for reasons. But since at least 2008, when they made that NCAA tournament for the first time under Scott, this person said, like, and they kind of pointed it out, they rely so heavily on the guards on the offensive end of the floor that it might be that there's just no energy to provide that defensive spark on the defensive end of the floor. There's no Davion Mitchell in this lineup, or there's no Jared Butler, who is also an elite level defender. There's no Maceo Teague. Like when Maceo Teague is your third level defender on that roster, he'd be your key defender on this team. And that's not a knock on Maceo or a knock on this team. It's a very different team. They're going to win in different ways. And so I do think that you're onto something there, though.
Yeah, and let me add to it, last night's game against Oklahoma, Dale Bonner came in and played 7.5 minutes, and that was strictly for his defense.
Yep.
And he did his job. He came in, I don't think he scored a point in the game last night, but he came in and played really good defense. So Dale Bonner, has been, for the most part this year, and his minutes are going down now, but he has been a real key defensively. I remember the Gonzaga game, Bonner forced a turnover late in the game that really led to the Baylor winning shot by Flagler. So Dale Bonner is a key there for Baylor, although he's playing limited minutes now.
Yeah. John, you want to go with your third one?
I'm still formulating, since you you didn't steal mine, but you took the one where I was headed. Do you have a third one so I can think about it?
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna go with Kansas, and I'm going on offense, and I'm saying you have to take better quality shots. Kansas is 85th in the country in effective field goal percentage at KenPom. That would be, I'm going through here, 6th in the Big 12. So it's very average in the Big 12, and that's conference only. And so for Kansas, you just have to take better shots. When you look at what cost the Jayhawks, some of these games that Kansas has lost during conference play, lost at K-State, lost at home to TCU by 23, lost at Baylor, lost at Iowa State. It wasn't taking the shots that it was during games like when it beat Texas, like when it beat Duke in the early season. And I understand Duke is not Duke this season, but it's for Kansas, the shot selection is not where it probably needs to be. Bill Self talked a little bit about it after that loss in Waco a few weeks back. But I think for me, that is the biggest key. Grady Dick is electric. Jalen Wilson can score. I mean, he's got Steph Curry range. If he's across half court, he's in range. And so I think that if you can get those two better shots, I think Kansas can make a run back to potentially the Final Four.
Yeah, very good. Yep, I totally agree with that. All right, so my third one would be let's go back to Baylor because that's the team I know best among all these Big 12 schools. And defense is certainly, or playing better defense would certainly be a key. But I'm going to say for Baylor, get well and stay well because I think, adding Jonathan back to the lineup is huge.
Yeah.
You look at teams this time of year and most are losing guys, to injury or whatever. There are very few teams, if any, that can add a guy like Jonathan Chumwa Chachua to the lineup at this point in the season. And listen, Jonathan's not 100%. You can tell that. But, man, I'd take him at 80% any day of the week. And just his energy, when he's out on the floor and just the way the team raises their level of play to get close to his level of play is huge. Whether he scores or not, whether he rebounds or not, just having him out there, I think is a huge plus. So that's a real plus, I think, for Baylor, adding him back into the lineup, back into the rotation. He played more minutes last night, 21 minutes last night. But then staying well is another key because we talked about Mike Miles and now Avery Anderson is out at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
And for Baylor, LJ Cryer didn't play in the second half last night. We were told a lower leg injury, not related to his foot injury. So that's good news. And they don't know the extent of that. But hopefully it's not lengthy because Cryer's a key one of those guards, that three-headed, sort of a four-headed monster for the Baylor guards now with Langston Love playing as well as he is alongside Flagler and Keontae George. So that would be my third, get healthy and stay healthy for Baylor.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Cryer, John talks about what they were told during the game. After the game, Scott Drew told us that he doesn't know specifics, but that he was told it was foot and unrelated to his previous foot injury. And so as soon as he said it's a foot thing,
right,
all of us in the media room go, oh Lord.
Exactly. And to be clear, we were told lower leg. I'm not disputing what Coach Drew said, but we were told lower leg, not related to his previous foot injury.
Perfect. Okay, so quick run through the Saturday slate as Zoom is telling us we have 10 minutes left. Saturday's schedule, 5 games on the docket, 11 a.m. on ESPN2, all times Central, West Virginia at number 5, Texas. I like Texas in this one, John.
I do too. To bounce back, they've had a little extra time after their, Saturday, Monday back-to-back. Now hadn't played since Monday. They're back home. So I would take Texas, but who knows what kind of rock fight this might be when you're in there with West Virginia.
Noon Central, CBS, number 9, Kansas at Oklahoma. The Lloyd Noble Center, kind of a house of horrors for Kansas. I think this one's close.
I would think so also. Yep. I would pick Kansas, but Oklahoma, I think, will play well. They're in that mode, man. They need a win. They need a signature win to really kickstart them down the stretch and to really help their cause for the postseason.
3 p.m. Central from Schomeyer Arena in Fort Worth. You will be on the call for this one on ESPN2, number 4. Not on ESPN2, the game you can watch on ESPN2. John will be on the Baylor Sports Network. You can watch this game. It is number 14 Baylor, number 17 TCU. I think the biggest key to this one is, does Mike Miles play?
Yeah, very much so. That's a huge key. But I would also say Baylor remembers that first game and blowing a 17-point lead and losing basically at the buzzer to TCU at home, losing a home game to TCU. So we visited with Adam Flagler post-game last night, and unprompted, he brought that up about TCU.
Okay.
So that means it's top of mind for those guys.
For sure. 5 p.m. Central from Ames, Iowa on ESPN2 as well. It is Oklahoma State and number 11 Iowa State. Big road opportunity for the Cowboys here and a chance for another winning streak for the Cyclones.
Iowa State's 5-0 at home this year, played really well at Hilton Coliseum, great fan support there, and Iowa State will be looking to bounce back from a disappointing loss. So that could be a really good game. I mean, like the way Oklahoma State's playing, but Iowa State looking to bounce back and being at home, I think I'd give a very slight edge to the Cyclones.
And these Cowboys-Cyclone games in Ames, since I enrolled at OSU, have been electric most years. And so I think this has really good potential for entertainment value. And then finally, 6 p.m. Central on ESPN Plus, number 12, K-State at Texas Tech. I think K-State's a prohibitive favorite, but man, this Tech team is sneaky right now.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to be ready when you go in there, and they'll have a great crowd, I'm sure, in Lubbock on Saturday evening. Is an evening game on Saturday. So, I would take K-State slightly, but you said it earlier. Tech's going to beat somebody and somebody else probably at home. So, this could be a really good one also.
A quick hit on the women's basketball slate. Texas sole possession of first place at 10-2 in the league. Oklahoma in second at 9-3 in conference play. Baylor now just 2 games back of first, but in third place in the conference at 7-4 on the conference record. And that is due to a tiebreaker win over Iowa State, who's also 7-4. Oklahoma State 7-5 in the league. Cowgirls are sneaky right now. Kansas 5-6 in the league, tied with West Virginia down for 6th, and then Tech in 8th at 4-7, K-State 9th at 3-8, and TCU at 10th with an 0-12 mark. As we look toward the weekend slate on the women's hardwood this weekend, John, Saturday 2 p.m. Central on ESPN Plus, it's Baylor at Oklahoma State. The Bears can get revenge on the Cowgirls. I like Baylor's chances, but this Oklahoma State team is very different from teams past.
Yeah, I think 2 very even teams. I think it could be a really good game there. Question in my mind is, how does Baylor come back from that? How do they respond from that gut punch loss to Oklahoma in overtime on Tuesday? I mean, that was a game Baylor never trailed until overtime, and then lost it. What was it? 5 points in 20 seconds or so by Oklahoma to tie the game, and then Baylor lost in overtime. That is a tough loss. That's tough to. I would think tough to bounce back from. They had a day off on Wednesday, so they're back at practice today, and then have to go on the road to Stillwater. So I think that's a lot about how Baylor responds to that loss.
I agree with you. It was 75-63 Bears with 5:19 to play.
Yeah.
And it just downhill from there, and credit Oklahoma. That's an explosive offense, and Oklahoma State's not far removed from doing that this season. So this is a really good game to watch here on Saturday. Also 2 p.m. Central in Lubbock, it is Kansas and Texas Tech. 4 p.m. in Austin, it is TCU and number 20 Texas. I think the women's game of the day is the 5 p.m. game in Morgantown on ESPN Plus. It's number 21 Iowa State at West Virginia. I think this has upset potential, John.
Yeah, very much so. Women's games, a lot like the men's. Sometimes hard to predict, and you see very good tight games. Back to Tuesday, that overtime win by Oklahoma, that was the first overtime game in the Big 12 women's all year in conference play. So, but boy, there are some tight games, close games, really hard to predict.
First overtime conference game on the season. Baylor's first overtime loss in 13 years when Oklahoma beat it in 2010. First overtime conference game inside the Farrell Center for Baylor's women's team since 2003.
Wow. 20 years.
And the first overtime game since a game I was at my freshman year at Oklahoma State, January of 2014 in Stillwater. And then the final game of the weekend on the women's hardwood, 1 p.m. Central on Sunday. It looks like this one's on ESPNU and ESPN Plus. It's number 16 Oklahoma and Kansas State. I think the Sooners are going to be a heavy favorite in that one. But in this year's Big 12, who knows, man? That could just completely go off of the walls. John will be in Fort Worth this weekend. That's a fun arena to be in.
Yeah, it is. And we hear it's sold out already. There's a lot of Baylor fans in the Metroplex, and they're having trouble finding tickets. I need 2 tickets for my son and soon-to-be daughter-in-law, incidentally. So you can help me with 2 tickets. But it's a tough ticket, which is great. Kind of speaks to the Baylor-TCU rivalry and how good both teams are.
Yeah, both teams incredible, and this rivalry is better whenever both teams are relevant, and we haven't gotten that for a while, but Jamie Dixon has built something of a monster there in Fort Worth, and it'll be curious to see. Baylor has the last few years, people tend to come back from injury against the Bears, and so does that hold true with Mike Miles, or are they playing it safe and playing it for March and keeping him out of it for one more game? That looked like again, it looked a lot worse than a hyperextension during when the injury happened in real time, and so the fact that it wasn't a tear is already great news for TCU. So what happens from there? And then after that, what was it? Turnovers was the biggest key in the second half. And so Baylor's got to be able to hold on to the basketball Saturday.
Yeah. And fast break points, for whatever reason, remember that TCU game in Waco?
Yeah.
It was like 23-2 fast break points.
Right.
And that was a shocking number. It was like Baylor was stuck in mud defensively, and the Frogs just ran by him for a lot of easy baskets.
Yeah, that was such a strange game. I remember I was the pool shooter for the first half, and Baylor couldn't miss. Shot 70. It shot better from 3 than 2. 75% from 3, 67% from the floor in the first half. My brain's weird. I don't know why I can memorize that box score so easily. But this is going to be a fun game. I'm not saying this because I cover Baylor, and I'm not saying this because, John, you're the voice of the Bears. This is the game of the day Saturday.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
In the conference.
No, I think you're right. I think it's a great matchup. 2 ranked teams and 2 teams that really need a win. And the first game, how good that was between these two, down to the wire. 1-point game, the first meeting. This is a great game.
This will be a fun weekend for sure. Things are heating up alongside the temperatures. John, I enjoyed it. Thank you for squeezing in some time. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Curtis. Always great to visit.
We will talk to you next time on the Big 12 Breakdown.